Hello all, this is the Aqua Agitators, and I'm Christos. And today I have the pleasure of hosting David from the other side of the Atlantic. David, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
David is the founder and director of Genesis Systems. David, would like to tell us a little bit about the company?
Sure. Genesis Systems was formed in 2017 with a very focused mission, sustainably solvable water scarcity. So it's a very ambitious company, and the way in which we are building technologies and putting ideas together is very far afield from the canon of the water industry.
Please remind me the technology that you employ.
So Genesis Systems is focused on material sciences, both fundamental and applied research. We have multiple laboratories, and one might say that our company is the skunk works, often associated with Lockheed Martin of water technologies. And at our facility, we have very interesting things going on, but predominantly we are focused on creating what we call renewable water from air, which is utility scale water that comes from the air.
Okay, and I think you have already made some interesting projects with this technology, no?
We have we have a lot of projects with the Department of Defense, and we are in the process of commercializing the technology in many industries.
It's also interesting your origins as a person in the water industry, right? Because you haven't exactly started your professional career from water.
That's right. I'm an aerospace engineer by background, and I was a scientist in the U.S. Department of Defense,
Hmm.
where I led lots of different programs, including work concentrating on quantum physics, AI, and hypersonics. But a personal event that I observed in 2016 while in the GCC region of the Middle East really caused me to focus on water because of its strategic importance. And I watched a nation literally go through its last native water supply, its last natural water resource. And at that point, they became almost entirely reliant on artificially produced water supplies or just-in-time water. And if you understand the fragility of the water networks and the water infrastructure, then you understand that can be an extreme security risk.
Yeah, water is always of strategic importance. So y- you're coming with another point of view into the water industry. And what do you make out of it in the last years that you have been working inside?
Well, the water industry is an extremely ossified industry. This means it is hardened like rock or concrete. It doesn't think. It doesn't try new things. It embraces the status quo, and it's you know your program is called Aqua Agitators. Um, that could mean several things. It could mean people who are disruptive, but it could also mean people who are, you know, in the, I guess, wastewater recycle, perhaps. But the point is that the industry needs agitators and it needs disruption. It needs to be like a tree shaken very hard, because if we're quite intellectually honest about it,
Hmm.
we don't understand fully um, even the basic amazing properties of water itself, right? If you take water and press it between two diamonds and hit it with a laser, water can become more hard than a diamond and hotter than the sun and exist in a state of called superionic ice. And in fact, that's how it exists for most of its state throughout the universe. And yet we think we know how to do water, and most of our water supplies are oriented and structured much like the days of the Roman Empire, where we're bringing heavy material over long distances at great expense with massive infrastructure incredible impact to ecologies and the environment, and also a great expense. And our company believes that, not unlike the EV car industry, that the water industry is ripe for disruption. And the way in which we see this disruption happening is very similar to what happened with US phone companies, or maybe other phone companies around the world, where at one time you had long lines going over telephone wires, great distances. You had switch yards and operators and all of this infrastructure, and it was needed at that time. And that's the water industry in its legacy form. But now we can move to wireless, right? And now we can move to a form of water supply that no longer requires all that infrastructure. And that is where Genesis Systems is going. We are taking the water supply to a wireless supply where you can create the water that you need in the amount you need at the time and place you need, wherever it is needed, without all of the infrastructure. And you can do that down to 10% relative humidity almost anywhere in the world outside the polar regions. So these projects are very exciting for the fact that they can scale. And one of the challenges that we have to bring to our colleagues is one of it being intellectually honest and understanding that we cannot continue to reach into the same bucket of solutions and get a different result. We have to bring in innovation. We have to do things in a new way. We have to integrate new things into what we're doing. And the water industry is one of the slowest to adopt because it's a very risk-averse industry. The water has to work. But what we're seeing worldwide is that major cities, major metropolitan areas, and other things are suffering because of a lack of action. And this resistance to taking risk and implementing and embracing new things is allowing a disaster to unfold worldwide. And that's really what we have to begin changing course on right away.
So I don't want to promote any specific technology, including yours, but I can definitely vouch for the lack of action and proactiveness in the water industry. What do you think is the main root of this problem, and how can we change that? How can we disrupt and be more controversial in this industry?
That's a good question. And I think there's a couple of things that can be addressed right away. One of the big trends that we foresee happening, and it's already beginning to happen, is the decentralization of water systems. The supply by a central municipal authority or a central provider is going to be broken up. So think of it again as our main telephone provider in the United States. It was once Southwestern Bell. Bell Telephone came out of Bell Labs, even dating back to before the namesake, right? Alexander Graham Bell. And so what began to happen is when the phone companies went wireless, Motorola and others like AT&T came in and they began to put up cell towers, right? So the same thing is happening with basically private water supplies. And so you're going to see this decentralization happen across industry. Next, you're going to see customers begin, and it's already happened, they've lost a lot of confidence in the established industries, the entrenched municipalities for providing quality water. For example, across Texas, many of the municipalities in the state in a given year will go on a boil water order, right, due to some contaminant in the system or some issue with the quality of the water. This constant politicizing and to be quite honest with you, constant failures in quality undermine customer confidence and send them looking elsewhere for a trusted water supply. So these are some of the drivers. And then finally, scarcity, obviously, according to Nature, just published a few weeks ago, the world has crossed 4.4 billion people in absolute water scarcity. So if you think about it right now, in terms of the infrastructure that typically one would think of to begin mitigating what is happening, there's no funding to do this infrastructure that needs to be built. in the way that we are building right now. So let me give you an example. In Dubai, there's an international airport-sized desalination plant that costs billions and billions of dollars, and it generates most of the city's water. But if you take that into Central Africa, for example, how are you going to get that funding? Where are you going to get the water that you need to desalinate because it's a landlocked country and it's not on a coastline? So we see major problems with the current structure of how water will be created going forward. And there is a big gap, if you will. And so this is the gap that we are working to address as a corporation, as a company, and that is to provide sustainable water from air from what we call the fast side of the water cycle. The slow side of the water cycle is the hundreds of years that it takes for water to trickle down into the ground and refill those aquifers, which we're pumping out very quickly. And we're on the back side of the power curve on what we would call the slow side of the water cycle. The fast side of the water cycle, when I take water out of the air, it's replenished in between 9 minutes and 9 days. And it's in a constant replenishment cycle from the sun. And that total water volume in there equates to about 37 quadrillion tons, which is 100 times all of the water contained in the rivers and streams on Earth. And it's going to be replaced every 9 days. So if you took all of humanity's water from the air, it would be an infinitesimal impact, and it's a complete and sustainable cycle, whereas groundwater is not. So I see a shift beginning, and there's first a mental shift, and preceding even that mental shift, a technological shift that makes that possible. And prior to the technologies that we've introduced, those technological shifts were not possible. That's why our company was built, because we evaluated all known and validated technologies in the entire world and said, how do we use the fast side of the water cycle? And those technologies did not exist 7.5 years ago. And so what did exist was methods that have been around since antiquity, where tribes used rain nets and other means of capturing water. And those were interesting, but not compelling, because number one, they did not scale. And number two, that because they did not scale, there was really no point in pursuing them. Today, it's both scalable and affordable because of the scientific research that Genesis has done. We've probably put in cumulatively more than 500 man years into the R&D. And today we have materials that would just shock you, because they make water from air with almost no energy. And this is exciting, because what it tells us is that not only are the processes scalable, but they can be affordable as well. And so when we are putting in pilots and programs and serving customer need, depending on how we're providing energy to the system, we are right now intersecting costs commensurate with desalination, and we're just commercializing. So we expect probably within the next 3 to 5 years to have a lower cost than methods like desalination. We have, for the OpEx, we're going to have a lower CapEx as well. And the added benefit of being very versatile in where those systems can be placed, such as interior regions, where you don't have to bring water from hundreds of miles away or from a coastal area, or to have that impact or the brine disposal.
I can definitely see the benefits of applying um, environmental water, yeah, um, given over to local end clients, such as isolated areas, yeah, or small facilities. You already mentioned, for example, the good work that you're doing with your defense contracts, yeah. I can also see definitely such systems working from together with existing desalination facilities,
This is
or
especially
even
true.
for example hotels that want to.
Absolutely.
Like recently, I went to a Greek island that had a lot of droughts this year, and they were all they all had big storages of water. to serve their customers. And I think, for example, one of your systems could easily work out to alleviate the situation over there. It all comes down to a combination of CapEx, OpEx, and maintenance
Yeah.
of the said systems.
Well,
And
one of the great benefits to our technologies are that we do not have any membranes that have to be replaced.
Mhm,
And because of that, we have a very low operations cost, and also because of the efficiencies of the systems, which are anywhere from 70 to 100 times greater efficiency than legacy systems. And because of those breakthroughs, um, they also scale. So we plan to build within the next 12 to 24 months the first 100,000 gallon per day system.
mhm.
And then from there, we will go up to million and several million gallons per day on those facilities. So we're very excited also to be partnered with AWS as one of only two companies in the world that they are incubating that are water themed. And so we will be with AWS in London in January on main
Mhm.
stage, sharing about our technologies. And as you know, not only does industry have to change, but we have several drivers that are beyond scarcity that are deepening crisis. And a lot of those have to do with societal trends, such as the implementation of AI into everyday work and the computing power and all of the water that will be needed to support that computing, such as data centers. So in terms of Genesis, uh, you know, we plan to be on the bleeding edge of how data centers support themselves with water generation and how they can become water positive is a very, very simple proposition in terms of our technology. And so we're very excited about the partnerships forming around the implementation of these technologies, because what this means is that those goals of becoming water positive, or at least water neutral, in these facilities that generally, by and large, use anywhere from 1 to 3 million gallons of water per day, they can be self-reliant. They no longer need to take the water from the community. And in fact, in many cases, they'll be able to give water back to the community. And so we're really excited about that future.
Just from my side, I think when it comes to the future of water, that can potentially, let's say, provide a better management is, first of all, the creation of new water sources should be the last thing on the list. Better management and water reuse are more important,
Well,
and
that's that's
they should be designed sparingly, including desalination itself.
yeah.
But again, I think not every technology will be the hero of the day, but every technology definitely has its niche commercial applications.
Yeah. Well,
And
I think again, I think this is an idea that will prove itself with time. And it's not going to be you or I who gives it the green light. It's going to be the customers that give it the green light.
definitely.
And what they're going to do is they're going to migrate toward what is convenient, what is the most cost effective,
Hmm.
and probably what is most safe and maintenance friendly. And what we
Yes.
see is better options now becoming available,
Mhm.
sensible options that don't impact the environment, and which open a whole new horizon in terms of opportunities that have never really been part of the decision calculus, whether you're involved in sustainable operations at your company or green initiatives. This is a new super weapon, if you will, in the toolkit against rapid climate change and the exhaustion of Earth's natural and scarce resources. And a great example is that there's a data center in the northeastern part of the United States who recently um, fell below uh, in terms of availability, the water that they were able to get from the community. And I won't mention the company, but they needed another 1 million gallons of water a day. And so they laid 6 miles of pipeline, and they put in a well. It was a private well. And all in all, the project spent $36 million to provide a well and a pipeline. And so we estimate that for 1/3 of that cost, a renewable water from air system could have been built at that data center that would have not only taken that data center off of community water, it would have potentially generated a surplus of water to give back to the community and made them water positive for about 1/3 the cost. So again, it's about letting people know that there are new technologies available. In some cases, the new can be implemented with the old, where we see, for example, the concentration of salts increasing near desalination plants. You can dilute incoming feed streams with this fresh water and make those plants viable, and perhaps the membranes won't have to work as hard because the water salt concentration is not as high. But again, these are uncomfortable technologies right now for the industry because no one knows what it means, right? It's a little bit like moving from the propeller age in aerospace to the jet age. And at first, everybody looked on it with great skepticism. All they knew is that these airplanes were faster and that they used more fuel in the early days of jet engines. And then later, jet engines improved. They became more reliable, right? And eventually, they were more efficient than even propeller engines. And it became the new choice. And now today, you have high bypass turbofans that are used in almost all commercial aviation. And in fact, they're so reliable that even the jets that go transoceanic, they only have 2 engines because they're that reliable. And so this is the disruption. This is the change that is undergoing right now in the industry. And it's going to be an uncomfortable one if we're honest about it. But it's not going to be uncomfortable for the customers. They're going to enjoy this. They're going to embrace this. It's going to be the ossified, concretized, entrenched industries that probably adapt last. Although even some municipalities we see right now are eager to get their customers these types of systems because, for example, we have a community here in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
They had roughly 1,400 customers run out of water, and their earliest forecast when they can get them water back is 2045. So almost 11 years from now. We can install systems in that community within 24 or less, 24, probably 12 months, and get that water restored for price points commensurate to what they were already providing to the customers. So that kind of capability, that kind of speed is probably one that we're going to find a lot more need for as this water crisis deepens globally.
If you don't mind my asking, you are bringing a new tool into the water industry, and you definitely believe in its value, right? So, are there any other ways of promoting your product besides waiting for the clients to understand its value, or there is a catastrophe and they have to find a solution? Is, for example, venture capital solution to all the new technology coming into the water market? Is our BOO projects or PPPs a solution to make some disruption in the
Yeah,
sector?
no, that's a great point to raise. So last year, Genesis Systems and the UN hosted with NASDAQ for the US traded markets a workshop on investment. And certainly there was a lot of conversation, as there is probably going this week during New York's Climate Week, on investment and where is the investment. And to be honest with you, water has never really been an attractive investment because it does not have a high upside like many industries, like, for example, space. There's this great promise of all the resources that we might exploit, right, in private space. And so that kind of profitability hasn't typically drawn investors. But what you're seeing now is, of course, what we know, and I'm sure by now everybody who's listening has had an opportunity to digest Global Water Intelligence report from this spring that shows water will become the #1 investment theme in the world's economy because water is supporting 60% of the global GDP.
Yep.
And I remember sitting with NASDAQ's chief of global markets, or the chief of capital markets, Jay Heller, at NASDAQ, and he said simply that water is the new Silicon Valley. And he said companies like Genesis are early companies in that. Those would be the Microsofts, the Googles, things like that. The early companies that are doing more than just creating a new widget, for example. You know, it's great to have a yard sprinkler that manages water more responsibly. Those are useful efforts. But we have a supply side problem predominantly globally. We have roughly 40% of the world's water supply is taken from the ground. And if you look at the data, you can go to the NASA, for instance, and the Gravity Research and Climate Experiment, and you can literally see the underground water disappearing. Well, what do you do to replace that water? Certainly it helps to recycle. That gets a percentage of it. And certainly it helps to conserve. But the water use is going up exponentially. So I have a smartphone here. This is 3,500 gallons of water, right? And if I have 3 of these phones, that's almost 10,000 gallons of water, or it's 10,500 gallons. So as the world reaches up for a better quality of life, its reach carries with it a water footprint that is unsustainable currently, right? And we know that. We can't sustain the current things we have doing the same things. And yet we're hoping to get there through efficiency. And I've sat on some boards with, in fact, the founder of CDP, Lord Andrew Goldsmith. And he says, well, we can get there by nature. We can get there by rewilding or letting watersheds go back. And I have to take issue with that, respectfully, because we're not going to get there by doing the same things that we're doing, because we're simply putting a greater demand on those natural resources than there's ever been. And a great example is the United States, who has grossly mismanaged its water supply. Our water across the Midwest will be out in most localities within the next 10 to 20 years. And we know that by the index wells and the rate at which they're decreasing. In some instances, on average, the water in the ground is decreasing at about 36 inches per year, with about a ½ inch of putback from the watersheds. And this deficit of 35.5 inches year over year, and we just measure against the total depth of that aquifer, and we know exactly when it runs out. And yet we continue to behave in the same way, hoping that something will change. So we know that this catastrophe is headed our direction, but we have to do something to move more quickly. And that kind of brings me to the next point, which is one that is psychological. But let me pause with that thought.
So, if you don't mind, from the conversation that we have, we see a clear failure in leadership when it comes to water. Failure from the states, failure from the industry. So what can we do in order to move the action of the board?
I'm really glad you asked. I had a conversation with recently with a global team of consultants, and I'm going to share with you what I shared with them. I'm a combat aviator before I was a strategist and a scientist, right, in the military. And I've flown many, many missions around the world. And, an aircraft, it operates in multiple dimensions in terms of its attitude. And at any point in time, if you as the pilot in charge of that aircraft lose the attitude, your aircraft can get in a condition called essentially a spin or an out of control condition. And when you are in that, you are taught to really do 3 things to save your life. These 3 things are needed to keep you from going into the side of the mountain. And right now, if we look at the world's water supply, we have more than half the world with us in water scarcity now. And we owe a great responsibility as industry professionals to not allow them to be thrashed, to not allow um, issues like what happened in Cape Town to continue to manifest, right? And so in order to do this, you're taught three things: to recognize, understand that you are in an out of control condition, to confirm that you are in an out of control condition and what you need to do next, and then finally to recover. And that is to apply the inputs that you know need to be done and to do it quickly and boldly, because without that, you will lose the altitude that you need to stay alive and ultimately end up in a crash situation. I think that the industry, if we're honest about it, has done a very good job recognizing. We know we have a problem within the wider water industry, and the customers know we have a problem. So we recognize that's no problem. Confirming, I think we're still a very muddy place with the confirming. I think most municipalities in the United States are in this bucket, except the ones in California who are already out of water. They're trying to figure out what to do next. Some of them are trucking water in. Some of them are looking at pipelines, aqueducts. They're getting, creative, but not in the right ways. It's not the disruptive change that we need. It's incremental change, right? An incremental change is the new generation of smartphone where you can barely tell the difference from the last generation. But an incremental change was moving from those flip phones with a keypad to the smartphone. That was a jump. We need those jumps. And so the industry is going to have to begin recovering by embracing the jumps in technology, because we don't have time for incrementalism anymore, because scarcity is going to become collapse in most areas if these changes are not made. And so recognize, confirm. We have to get faster with confirming what we have to do to implement those changes in communities. I mentioned one community here in Florida that will have water restored by 2045. This is a great example of a community that is not confirming and recovering. Instead, they're allowing the customers to suffer through. And finally, to implement recovery takes boldness and audacity. It takes a responsibility to have service to the customers and a sense of service toward community before self-preservation. And I think this is a reality of politics, and there is a lot of politics with water. But one of those is that the penalty for inaction has to become greater. There has to be a greater accountability for those who are refusing to implement measures rather than just waiting and playing it safe and worrying about self-preservation. And so that's the part of service before self, where
Well,
we understand that we
the
can't
problem
wait.
is lack of accountability has been a problem since the invention of the politics, no?
It's true. It's true. But in this case, next to air, right, water is the thing you need the most. And what I always say is that water is the economic potential energy of a nation. Think
Yes.
about it.
And
And what the nations don't realize is that their competitive advantage is gone without the water supply. And so this becomes now the preeminent thing in politics, even in some cases, more important than defense. And that should sound very strange from me to you, because I have a background in defense. But let's think of it this way. If I interrupt one of the water generation stations in a place in the world that is entirely dependent on a centralized water system, I can disrupt the entire ability to sustain the population. And the only other thing I can do that with that I know of in the world is a weapon of mass destruction. And so in some cases, the security risks of water scarcity are commensurate with weapons of mass destruction, only they're not being mitigated. The wrong people are thinking about how to take care of the challenges, and it does require greater collaboration with the policymakers and the politicians and users to put pressure to make sure that there is action. And those actions have to be the right actions that don't have second and third order effects.
exactly. And with that, David, I would like to thank you very much for taking time out of your very busy agenda to be on the show today. I think I'll be looking forward to how you progress your commercial agenda and try to get the message outside of the water bubble that us water professionals live in. It's been a pleasure, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
Hey, Christos, thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for letting me agitate a little with you.
Looking forward for the next session.
Me too.
Take
Bye.
care, everybody.